in your testimony, you said that Americans deserve a government that works for them, a government that makes their lives easier and more secure. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Great. I'd like to read through a couple of the grants that DOGE has pulled back, and I'd like to get your take on them. They pulled back a $1.5 million NIH grant to Morehouse College. It was called the Center to Advance Reproductive Justice and Behavioral Health among Black, pregnant / postpartum women and birthing people. Do you think that that makes Americans' lives easier and more secure?
I think that medical and scientific research of all types.
Do you think that that constitutes critical research? According to your testimony, NIH grants are critical research?
I think that government research of all types in the medical,
including a birthing people?
I think bench research of all types plays a fundamental
What is a
role.
birthing person?
Sir, I am here to talk about the DOGE impact.
Well, I'm
for
asking
working
you about this
families.
grant and you're defending it. So I'm asking you who is birthing people?
I am not familiar with this grant. I take a position that all kinds of government research, medical,
Is a
pharmaceutical,
birthing person a woman? Is that another
biological-
word for female?
What exactly is a birthing person? That one question completely flipped this DOE hearing upside down. Congressman Brandon Gill starts reading these taxpayer-funded grant titles out loud, and suddenly the entire room gets uncomfortable, like visibly uncomfortable. And the Democrats' witness, she looked like somebody trying to explain cryptocurrency to their grandma at Thanksgiving dinner. Just a lot of words, but nobody's actually answering the question.
That is outside the scope of my expertise.
Seems like erasure language to me. I've been told that type of vernacular constitutes erasure language. How about another one? How about the conference, Gender Equity in the Mathematical Study of Commutative Algebra? Do you think that that's a valid form of government spending?
I think mathematical research of all types is deserving of government.
What about
investment.
studying, and this is directly from the National Science Foundation's website, women and non-binary mathematicians?
Again, I think all kinds of government investment should be dedicated toward mathematical.
All kinds of government investment.
scientific-
You don't have any kind of limit on what we're spending our money on? Just everything? Is that your testimony?
I am talking about DOGE. You brought up.
So am I. This is a grant that DOGE cut.
I am not familiar with this particular grant, but I think government investment in mathematical, biological.
Okay. Let's do another one. This one is called hashtag Transcendent Health, adapting an LGB plus inclusive teen pregnancy prevention program for transgender boys. I can't even say this without laughing. Do you think that that is a useful form of our tax spend?
I am not familiar with that grant, but I think bench research, government investment in scientific and
Teen
pharmaceutical
pregnancy
research.
for transgender boys. Do you think that that is a useful spend of our tax dollars?
I think government investment in all kinds of scientific research is of the utmost importance.
Including pregnancy prevention for transgender boys. Okay. Let me ask you, we can come back to this later maybe. Do you support abolishing the filibuster still?
I am here to talk about DOGE respectfully.
Right.
and
We could abolish the filibuster and get a lot of DOGE cuts through. And you've written at length on your Twitter about abolishing the filibuster. I'm just curious if you think that we should do that still.
I did a lot of previous work on different topics because I am an economic policy expert, and respectfully, I'm here to talk about DOGE cuts.
Okay, but we could abolish the filibuster and get DOGE cuts. This is totally germane here. Do you think we should?
I am here to talk about DOGE cuts, not strategies for achieving more of them, but the harms that they have produced for working families.
That's a convenient change of opinion. I noticed that most of your comments about the filibuster were during the Biden administration. But we can move on. Let's go back to some more of these grants. Do you think that we should be spending money on, quote, the racialized basis of trait judgments from faces?
I am not at all familiar with that grant.
It's a $500,000 NSF grant.
Okay, I am not familiar with the subject matter or the
But you're,
particular
but you're
grant.
defending these.
I am saying that I think the government
You're pretty
has,
adamant against DOGE cuts, and I'm asking you if you support the cuts
I think that
that
there
DOGE
is
has found.
economic and medical, public health, communal benefit to
What
the
about
government investing in.
cross-sex steroid therapy and cardiovascular risk in the transgender female?
Again, I think government investment in scientific research is
Right.
important.
Thank you for your testimony. I appreciate it.
The gentleman's time.
All right, so here's the setup. This hearing was supposed to be about DOE cuts and federal spending. Pretty straightforward topic, right? But then Brandon Gill starts pulling up actual grants funded with taxpayer money. Real grants, real titles, straight from federal databases. And wow, once those titles started getting read out loud, the entire tone of the hearing changed instantly. The first grant involved research connected to birthing people. Then there was another one about gender equity and mathematics focused on women and non-binary mathematicians. Then another involving transgender pregnancy prevention programs. And look, most Americans support real scientific research. Of course they do. Nobody's saying medical research is bad, but the question here was, why are taxpayers funding programs that sound more ideological than practical? That's the issue. And every time Gill asked a direct question, the witness would kind of pivot back to broad statements like, all scientific research is important. Okay, sure, but Congress isn't supposed to just rubber stamp every program with the word research attached to it. Their job is oversight. That's literally part of how the system is supposed to work. So the moment everybody's talking about happens when Gill asks the witness to define the term birthing people. Simple question, seriously, that's it. And somehow nobody wants to answer it directly. The witness keeps trying to redirect the conversation back toward general support for medical research, but Gill keeps bringing it back to the actual language being used. And honestly, this is where a lot of regular Americans probably started nodding along, because people are exhausted by this kind of word game politics. Most people hear birthing people and immediately think, you mean women? That's not controversial to most Americans. That's just normal language. And the more institutions avoid giving clear answers to basic questions, the more people start feeling like they're being talked down to. That's why this exchange blew up online. Gill wasn't screaming, he wasn't throwing insults, he was just calmly reading grant titles and asking straightforward questions. And sometimes that's actually more effective than yelling. Then the hearing moves into this grant about women and non-binary mathematicians. Now again, Gill's point wasn't math is bad, obviously. His point was, why does every federally funded academic program now seem to come wrapped in identity politics?
That's what people are reacting to. Americans are sitting there trying to afford groceries, rent, gas, and meanwhile Washington is funding programs with titles that sound like somebody generated them using a university buzzword machine. And look, maybe some of these programs have value, fine, but taxpayers still have the right to ask questions about them. That's not anti-science, that's accountability. Then things got even more awkward when Gill brought up the transgender pregnancy prevention grant. And you could almost feel the room tighten up a little bit, because at that point the hearing stopped sounding like a normal budget discussion and started sounding like two completely different versions of reality colliding with each other. Gill keeps bringing the conversation back to common sense questions. Where's the limit? What counts as essential? Why should taxpayers fund this? And the witness basically keeps responding with, well, all scientific research matters. But eventually people start asking, okay, but does that mean literally everything qualifies? That's the core issue here. Because once government reaches the point where every single program gets defended automatically, accountability disappears. And honestly, one of the funniest parts of the hearing was the filibuster exchange. Gill brings up the witness's old comments about abolishing the filibuster, and suddenly she wants to stay laser-focused only on DOGE cuts. Funny how procedural rules in Washington become extremely important depending on who happens to be in power at the time. And viewers notice that stuff. At this point, Washington spends taxpayer money the same way people click accept cookies online. Nobody reads it, nobody understands it, everybody just hopes nothing weird happens afterward. Subscribe to Congress Showdown. And remember, if Congress ever announces a federally funded study called The Emotional Journey of Sustainable Astrology Through Interpretive Yoga, just know somewhere in Washington, somebody's calling it critical infrastructure.